So before we begin this exercise, let's just take a quick look at what we're going to be doing. I'm going to be providing you with some images and some text, and we are going to be laying them out in a layout similar to this here, with two artboards that represent the front and the back of this brochure. You can also see that it is divided into three. We're going to be talking about the different ways we can fold a brochure. This is going to be like this were a real job. I do want to mention here that there are other programs that do similar type of layout work. I'm specifically talking about InDesign. InDesign is a wonderful layout program that handles this sort of document really well. However, I actually find that InDesign is more featured than it needs to be for a simple document. If I have a two-page document like I have here, I would prefer to do this in Illustrator. This also goes for things like business cards, for example. I find that Illustrator's type tool is more than capable of handling this sort of work. So let's talk specifically about what we're going to do. We are going to format our text. We're also going to create some paragraph styles that make this sort of formatting much easier. We're also going to then export this file as a printable document, as a PDF file. This is a file that we could send directly to the printer, and they could work with these files to create your document. So let's begin. I'm going to start by coming to Illustrator, and we're going to create a new document. We'll come to the File drop-down menu, we'll select New. From the new document window, we are going to make some specific changes. First of all, let's make sure that we are working in horizontal landscape. My width needs to be 11, and my height 8.5. My artboards, I currently only have one artboard, but I do want a front and a back, so let's create two artboards by clicking the up arrow. Now this is a document that is going to be sent to a printer. The printer is going to be printing imagery right off the edge of the document. For a printer, that's called a bleed, and we need to account for that in this document setup. So I'm going to hit this up arrow here. That's going to add a little bit of bleed to each side of our document. Top, bottom, right, and left. This is an 1/8 of an inch of a bleed. That's often enough, but always talk to your printer before you create a document like this. Sometimes printers require a full 1/4 of an inch bleed. We're going to leave our document as an 1/8 of an inch bleed as we proceed. Now, I'm going to scroll down the advanced options here because this is important. By default, we are working in CMYK mode. Remember, this is going to be sent to a printer, and they are going to be working in CMYK process colors. So we're going to want to make sure that that is maintained. We're also going to want to have as high a resolution as possible. 300 pixels per inch is very good for a printed document. That's all we need to do, though. We're going to click the Create button. Now I am going to make one change to the layout here. You can see that I've got these set up side by side. I'm going to press Command minus sign on my keyboard to zoom out, and I'm going to come over to my toolbox. Here is my artboard tool. Let's rearrange this just quickly because I would like us all to be seeing the same thing. I'm going to place my artboards one above the other. I'm going to come back to my toolbox and just click once on the selection arrow tool to get out of that artboard view. I may increase that inside my window like so. But I now have my front and back of my document showing here. Let's place the imagery and text that we're going to be using. Hopefully you've already downloaded all that. I'm going to come to the File drop-down menu and select Place. From this folder, I'm just going to select the top item, hold down the Shift button, and I'm going to select all of these items and select Place. I'm going to say OK. And I will say OK for that as well. We now have our image placement tool. I'm just going to position my photos to the side here. There's my text. Now there are more photos here than we really are probably going to actually use in our layout. I'm going to let you decide what photos to use and where to position them. Now that we've got our photos and text, let's talk about the grid and layout for this document. I'm just going to bring this placed item into view. What we're seeing here are all the different ways we can take a piece of paper and fold it to make a brochure. There's all sorts of interesting, fun ways to do this. And as a designer, you can have a lot of fun to create the experience of unfolding a brochure. It doesn't have to be a simple try, roll, fold as we see here. It could be something much more interesting. But we are going to keep our fold similar to this one, a try, roll, fold. That's the one we normally see, where we see a front flap, and then you open up that to see a inside flap that opens up the opposite way to reveal a full inside spread, which becomes the inside of our brochure. I'm going to hit Command 0 so that I can take a look at the first of my artboards. Here is the one that I'm working with right now. As you can see, there is nothing to this artboard. That red line, by the way, is the 1/4 inch bleed that we created earlier. What we need to do is we need to divide this page up into 3 so that we can create the 3 equal columns that will become the folded panels of our brochure. To do that, we are going to create some guides. The first thing we need to do in order to create guides is to come to the View drop-down menu and select Rulers, Show Rulers. Here, I'm just going to hit Command-sign so I can see this just a little bit more clearly in my field. Now that I've got the guides showing, I can drag out a ruler just by clicking on either the horizontal or vertical ruler and clicking and dragging into my artboard. What I want to do is drag my first guide right over the left edge of the artboard. It's helpful to have your smart guides turned on for this because then the guides will lock into place. Let's create a second guide by dragging out another guide from the vertical ruler, and we'll just drag that to the right edge of our artboard. That'll lock into place. Let's drag out 2 more to define the middle column. I'm going to make sure that my guides are unlocked by coming to the View drop-down menu, coming here to Guides, and making sure that there is not a check mark beside Lock Guides, just by clicking off on this option here. Once those are unlocked, I can select them just by dragging over top. You can see my guides now turn blue. Across my control panel, you will see that these align options are available. But next to the alignment options are the distribute options. You can see that we can vertically distribute items, but we can also horizontally distribute items. That's exactly what I want to do here. I want to horizontally distribute center. That means the guides will be equally spaced once I click this icon. And there we go. My guides now define each of the columns. Now I can see here on the bottom here, I wasn't actually very careful about making sure that my 2 artboards were aligned. This bottom artboard should align with these guides too. If yours is out of alignment like mine, I'm going to make a quick change by coming back to my toolbox, to my artboard tool. I'm just going to click on this artboard and make sure that it aligns now with the guides. Okay, let's come back here to my arrow tool. I now have guides that define the columns for both my inside and outside of my brochure. Go Command-0 to place that artboard back into my screen. What I need to do now is I need to define the margins of my brochure, meaning the area within which I can place my text and images so that it feels like it's a cohesive grid, as we talked about in the first video. What I want to do is create a margin of a 1/2 inch that goes around this entire page, within which that I can place my text. I also want to have a gutter that defines the space in between my text. Well, I could, if I wanted to, just drag out a number of guides and align them very carefully with the edges here and like so. However, that is a lot of measuring and a lot of guides. There is actually an easier way for us to do this. I'm just going to go Command-Z to get rid of those guides. What we are going to do is we're going to use the Type tool to define our margins for us. I'm going to come along here to my Type tool. I'm just going to click once in the very top right corner of my document. Make sure that I'm right in that corner, that I'm on the lines. I'm going to click and I'm going to drag down all the way down to the bottom right corner of my document, like so. Don't drag too far or you'll go right off the page. Of course, Illustrator has filled this text document with that dummy text that we talked about earlier. We won't worry about that right now. Let's make some changes to this. In fact, I'm just going to go Command-sign so I can see this a little bit better. I now have a text block that takes up the entire page of my document. What I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to come to the Type drop-down menu, and I'm going to select Area Type Options, because that's what we've just created, a type area. With Area Type Options panel opened, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to redefine the number of columns. You can see that I have this currently set to 1. I'm going to click that up to 3 columns. Let's hit preview so we can see this. So already you can see what has happened. We've now got the 3 columns of our layout. But I mentioned the margins. Now that here is represented by what's called the inset spacing. I'm just going to click this arrow up a number of times until I see 0.5. There I go. I now have a 1/2 inch around my entire document. I also mentioned, though, that I wanted to have a larger gutter. You can see that I currently have a gutter spacing of 1/4 inch. Let's bring that up to 0.5 as well. That way I have equal spacing in between my text blocks as I do around the edges. This feels cohesive to me, and I think this will work just fine. If you would like, you can make your gutters even broader. That's not a bad way of doing it either. I'm going to say okay. I'm going to use this bit of dummy text here to help me define the rest of my guides. I'm going to drag out another vertical guide from this ruler and define the left edge of that column of type, and then the right edge of that column of type. There we go. I'm also going to define the horizontal margins by dragging out from my horizontal ruler. If I duplicate this text block and drag it into my other artboard, I can set guides for that space too. I'm just going to hit Command-sign so I can zoom out a little bit. I can see that. I'm just going to hold down my Option button while I drag out another instance of that text block and make sure that it's positioned in the middle of that artboard. I can now drag out some rulers from my horizontal rulers. All right, Command-0 to zoom out, and I now have my guides set up just the way I want them. I'm going to delete that. I'm going to delete that. So there are all my guides all set up. Let's come back to our sample just for a second and take a look. You can see that we have these color blocks here that help to define our columns. Let's put those in first. Before I do, though, I do want to mention that the color that I'm working with is based upon a color scheme that I've already created. This color scheme is based upon the logo that I'm using. Of course, your logo will probably be different, meaning your color scheme will be different. So I'm going to encourage you to do this brochure using your graphic elements, your logo, your color scheme. I'm going to come back here. Now, the only issue I have, though, is this color scheme is currently associated with this document. Remember, with Illustrator, those color schemes don't travel from document to document. I'm going to need to import that. You may, in fact, have your color scheme in a separate document. Open up that document, and in the Swatches panel, click on the Options button and choose Save Swatch Library as AI. Give that color group an appropriate name and say Save. Then, when we come to this document, I can open up the Swatches panel, click on the Options button, and from Open Swatch Library, I can come to User Defined, and I can choose the color group that I want. By clicking on that, you can see I've added that to my Swatches panel. Close that. Let's also make sure that we're working properly on layers. I'm going to come to my Layers panel. Currently, I only have the one layer. Let's create a new layer for the color block panels. I'm going to double click that layer and call that color blocks. I'm going to create another layer above that by clicking on the new layer icon. I'm going to call that text. And I'm going to create one more layer and double click that one and call that one photos. Let's make sure that we're working on our color blocks layer. And in my layout, I have one color block that covers the center column of the outside of my brochure. This is going to be the outside. This here is the front column. Here is going to be the back column. I'm going to put a rectangle over top of that back column. But I'm going to remember that in my layout, this is bleeding off the top and bottom edge of my brochure, meaning that I'm going to have to create a rectangle that goes over the edges of my brochure. Let me zoom in so I can see this a bit better. I'm going to click outside of my document, drag over top of the center column, and release. I'm going to choose my light green from my color. Of course, your color will be probably different. I need two more columns. I'm going to go Command-sign to zoom out. I need two more columns for the bottom. Hold down my Option button and click and drag another column that sits on the left edge of that brochure. Hold down my Option button again and drag out another color block that fits on the outside. Okay. I'm going to lock that layer. Okay, now let's deal with our text. Our text is this placed object over here. I'm actually going to drag it over to the right-hand side so I can see this a little bit better. And you can see there's, in this text block, a little red icon in the bottom right corner there. That tells me that there's more text. Let's drag down this bounding box anchor and just reveal all the remaining text. Ooh, there's a lot of text that has to fit into this space. Let's just take a look at this a bit more closely. I'm going to zoom into this. You can see that the first two paragraphs, who we are and what we do, in my layout, I've put them over here on the inside flap of my brochure. Imagine how this is folded. This gets folded on the inside. This is the front panel. This is revealed when someone opens up the front panel. So it's one of the very first things that someone sees. And that's exactly what we want them to see, is their mission statement. Essentially, that's what this is. So let's come along here. I'm just going to click and drag over top of these two paragraphs. Once I have them selected, I'm going to copy them, Command C. Once I have them copied, I'm going to press my hand icon and move over to this column here. And I'm going to come over to my toolbox and choose my type tool. And I'm going to create a type area that corresponds to these guides for this panel. And now I'm going to paste the copied text. All right. Let's do the same for all the remaining text. Let me zoom out just a little bit, Command minus sign. If I take a look at the sample brochure, you can see that the We Grow community text is on the left side of the inside of our brochure, and the apprenticeships section is on the right side of our brochure. Let's come back here. I'm going to select the We Grow community text all the way down here to Together We Are Growing the Change. Command copy. I'm going to come back over here to my black arrow. I think rather than dragging out another text block, I'm just going to use the one that I currently have. Before I copy this text area, I do recognize accidentally that I've created this on layer 1 here. Layer 1 I was going to reserve just for my reference photos. So let's make sure that I bring this onto the text layer. Remember, we can do that easily. That little blue dot here represents the selected text on layer 1. If I click on that blue dot and drag it onto the text layer, it's now been positioned on the correct layer. Now I'm able to hold down my Option button and drag out that text block and position it like so. I'm going to press Command 0 now on my keyboard to zoom into that artboard. If I come along here with my text tool and just click once into that text field, and then press Command A for all, I can select that entire text block. What I want to do is I want to paste the text that I had copied earlier. Let's go Command V, and now you can see that that is now positioned in that area. You can see, though, I do have a little red indicator down at the bottom here, meaning that there is text that is not showing, that's going off the bottom edge. Don't worry, we are going to reformat this text in just a little bit so that we can fit all of that text in here. Let's create our last text area. Again, I'm going to go Command minus sign so I can zoom out, and I'm going to use my text tool to copy the apprenticeship section here. Command C for copy. Again, I'm going to come back to my black arrow just to duplicate that text block by holding down the Option button and dragging over into its column space. Come along with my text tool, click once into that space. I'm going to select all the text by going Command A, and then I'm going to replace this text by pressing Command V. There we go. I'm going to go press Command 0 on my keyboard just to make sure that this is my screen just a little bit better. You'll notice that each one of these columns of text has a headline and what we call body copy underneath. We'll call them title and body copy. The titles and the body copy are currently formatted in exactly the same way, but it would make sense for us to reformat this in such a way that the titles are a little bit more noticeable. The titles act as doorways into our text, and let's make our doorways much more interesting. I'm going to come along here to my type tool. I'm just going to drag over top of my We Grow community title. Now, I'm going to let you format this any way you would like, but the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the size. I want my titles to be a little bit larger. I'm going to say 15 point. I'm also going to change the font family. Currently it's set to the default Myriad Pro. Like I say, I always recommend you change Myriad Pro to something else. I already know what I'm going to change mine to. I have something called Balboa Plus. I believe that's something that you can get from Google Fonts. But I'll let you decide what you want that font to be. I recommend something a little bit heavier in its weight, but you can see I'm choosing something that is both heavy and condensed, so it won't take up a lot of visual space, even though the weight of the letter forms is quite broad. I am going to make a change to the color. I'm going to come back to my swatches panel, and I'm going to use my dark green. You're going to use, of course, whatever color you see appropriate. If I click off here, though, you can see that the We Grow community title now looks pretty good. Now it looks differentiated from the body copy. There's one more thing I want to do with this title though. I would like there to be some spacing between the title and the body copy underneath it. In order to do that, I'm going to have to open up the paragraph panel. The paragraph panel in my control panel is right here. But of course, if you don't see that, you can come to the window drop-down menu, select type, and then paragraph. The paragraph allows us to work with spacings after paragraphs. There is a paragraph return after this title, and you can see that this field right here allows me to create a space after the paragraph. I'm just going to hit the up arrow, and you can see that I'm slowly adding a little bit of spacing in between my title and the body copy. I don't want there to be very much. I think 4-point would be just fine, as a matter of fact. Once I have this title formatted the way I want, with its color, font family, and paragraph spacing, I'd like to be able to apply that easily to all the other titles in my document. In order to do that, we are going to work with something called a paragraph style. I'm going to come back here to the window drop-down menu. Again, I'm going to come down here to where it says type. This time, I'm going to open up this panel here called paragraph styles. You can see that we have a normal paragraph style here with a little plus sign next to it. What that means is that we started off with something that was a default paragraph style, which was Myriad Pro, and we've made some changes to it. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to save these changes as a specific paragraph style that I can apply to other paragraphs. In order to do that, I'm going to first of all highlight that title like so. I'm going to come to paragraph styles here, and I'm going to click on this icon here to create a new style. This new paragraph style 1 has all the properties and styling of this title here. So let's change the name by clicking paragraph style 1 twice. And I'm going to call this title. I'm going to click down here to accept that. This title has all the properties of this text here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come along here to my type tool. I'm going to select apprenticeships. That is the title for this text area. And I'm just going to click once on title. And you can see that it immediately applies all that styling to that text. If I hit Command-sign to zoom out a little bit, I can apply those titles to the other parts of our text area. Let's do that with our body copy. I'm going to work with this type area here, but you can work with any text area that you have on your brochure. I'm going to hit Command+sign so I can see this a little bit better. Position that, reposition some of this over here like so. I'm going to use my text tool, and I'm going to select the text, and I'm going to make a simple change. I'm going to choose a slight serif font. I've always been partial to Bodoni, and I think its rounded forms are a nice contrast to the styling of the titles. I'm going to make a change to the size, though. Of course, this is default 12-point. I'm going to just hit the down arrow a couple times. I think 10-point would be just fine for this brochure, but I am going to give it a little bit more leading. So again, I'm going to come over here to my character panel, and I'm just going to add some leading by clicking the up arrow here. I think 14-point is just fine. If I want to take a look at what that looks like, I think that looks great as far as I'm concerned. I'm going to save this as a paragraph style. Again, I'm just going to make sure that I select that whole paragraph. I'm going to come back to my paragraph styles panel. I'm going to click once again on my create new style button. There's paragraph style 2, but this is specifically my body copy styling. So I'm going to double click that, and we're going to call that body. Press return. I now want to apply that to all the other text that requires it. I'm going to hit Command-sign to zoom out again. Position that like so. Select over my paragraph and click body. Again, hold my space bar down to move myself up. And then I'm just going to select over top of all of that. Now I do have some hidden text here, so there might in fact be some more text I'm going to have to select in just a moment, but I'm just going to hit body here. Sure enough, yes, there was some stuff down here. I'm just going to make sure I select all of that as well and hit body. And let's do one more on this side, body. Oh, and yes, there was some hidden stuff here. So again, I'm just going to, there we go. Command-sign a few times to zoom out so I can see what that looks like. If I want to see what this looks like without all the guides, I can come to the View drop-down menu and choose Guides, Hide Guides, or Command: on your keyboard for keyboard shortcut. Now that's all I really wanted to do in terms of this layout for this tutorial video. There's still some more text to be laid out here. You'll notice that at the bottom of our text block, there is the details about the farmer's market. That goes on the back panel back here. I'm going to let you lay that out. I'm also going to let you position your photographs and whatever other elements you want to put in here, like your logo or your City Farm icons. The last thing, though, I'm going to get you to do is export this as a printable PDF. Let me show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to use my sample brochure over here to show you how I want you to export this. Like I said, this is meant to be an actual brochure that you would send to a printer. Let me show you how you would do this. I'm going to come to the File drop-down menu, and I'm going to choose Save As. And from here, I'm going to want to make sure that I choose the correct folder. Down here where it says Format, I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to choose Adobe PDF. PDF stands for Portable Document Format. It's what allows us to send any of our Illustrator files to someone else and allows them to work with them. I'm going to choose PDF, and I'm going to say Save. Now, this dialog box is going to come up. And you can see that there are some options here. Whenever sending something to be printed, I will often send it as press quality. That will provide the resolution necessary, but it's a good idea to talk to your printer before deciding on any of these. I'm going to leave this as press quality. On the left-hand side, we have some options here. I'm going to come here to where it says compression. This allows me to decide how the images are going to be compressed or not compressed. There's nothing really here that I have ever played with or changed, and I don't recommend you do that either. I am going to come here where it says marks and bleeds, and you'll notice that there is something here called marks, all printers marks, and by default that's turned off. Again, you may want to talk to your printer about this, but generally I turn that on. What that does is it provides all the trim marks, registration marks, color bars, and page information that the printer uses to print your document correctly. Now, all these other options here, again, I don't recommend that you change anything. Your preset will have made all these choices for you. Once you've made those changes, come here to Save PDF. If you were to open up that PDF document in Adobe Acrobat Reader or something like that, you will see you now have a document that has all the printer's registration marks ready to be sent to a printer. Now, what I want from you is not this final file. This final PDF file is too large for you to email it to me. What I'd like you to do, though, is send me a JPEG of your layout. And remember how we do that. Come to the File drop-down menu, choose Export. We'll choose Export As. From here, I want you to choose JPEG as your format. And I want you to make sure that you are using your artboards. I don't want there to be anything off the side that you're exporting as well. We're going to choose Export. From here, we'll just make sure that the quality is set to maximum. I'm not going to get you to set the resolution to anything higher than 72, however, just because that's going to create a file too large to email. So once you've set that to these settings, I want you to press OK. Those exported JPEG files, I want you to email to me. And that will be our final exercise together. The skills that we utilized in this exercise will hopefully allow you to create some strong text as a part of your final poster project.